Hello and welcome back to the show. Well, did you know that there are thousands of people who are injured on the job right here in Louisiana every year, and very often they are shocked to learn the real truth about how the Louisiana workers' compensation system works. Well, today, to help walk us through it is attorney Mike Whitehead, who has been practicing workers' compensation law for more than 2 decades.
My friend Mike is one of the best minds on this subject, and he has helped me on workers' comp cases in the past. We got a lot to get to, so let's get right to it. Mike, why don't you explain for people what is a work comp claim, what happens to somebody when they get hurt on the job? What are their rights?
Well, in the most basic sense, John, a workers' compensation claims comes from an injury at work, and the injury may or may not produce a disabling condition. You may be hurt but able to work, and you may be hurt and not able to work. And so workers' comp essentially has 2 sides. One is the employer's obligation or responsibility to pay for your medical bills, and if you are disabled and can't work, the employer has a responsibility to pay you for some of your wage loss.
Well, as I mentioned, you've been doing this for more than 2 decades, so you've seen lots of cases. What do you find, though, when it comes to people who are injured? Do they know what to do first?
I would say, as a rule, most people have absolutely no idea. If they know anything, it's from a friend, a family member, an acquaintance who may have had a workers' comp claim themselves. But as a rule, most people are completely at a loss and don't know where to start.
And so what do you say? Where should they start?
You start by going to your employer and letting them know without fail that you have been hurt, and you'd be surprised how many people attempt to keep working when they're hurt and say, well, I don't want to tell my employer about it, I want to keep my job. And that can be a very bad thing later on if you don't report the injury.
Let me add to that, and as I alluded to in the very beginning, I actually do work in the area of workers' compensation law, and many times I've involved Mike Whitehead, who works exclusively in the area of work comp law, representing the injured. And in fact, one of the nice things about Mike here is he previously worked on the defense side, so he has a perspective having represented employers, and now in the years past doing almost exclusively work representing the injured. But perspective, somebody gets hurt on the job. Well, number one, let your employer know then and there on that day. Tell your supervisor, I just fell down. I just slipped and fell down. Something just fell off a shelf and hit me in the head. I'm bleeding. Maybe I need to get to the hospital. Let them know, okay? Number two, if you're conscious, somebody else, you tell them. If it's not you, hopefully they find you and they report it. Right. Get medical care. Obviously, your health is number one, right? Get to the doctor, get treated. If you can return to work, well, good, then you're lucky. If you can't return to work, you have the option, you have the right, of course, to get your medical bills paid by the employer. Not your health care. If you have health insurance, your employer.
And that's a very important distinction to make,
and we'll talk about that too, but your employer owes you for your medical bills that are the result of the injury, and owes you wages if you cannot work as a result of the injury. Not 100% of your wages. Why don't you talk about that?
No, and that's a big misconception. People believe that if you've been injured and can't work, your employer or their insurance company has to pay you 100% of your wages. But as a rule, workers' comp is 2/3 of your wages. So if you're disabled, you're only entitled to 2/3 of your wages, and there's a maximum amount that is owed weekly. So if you were a very, very high wage earner, you're going to be capped at a level that's far below what you actually earn.
Right. Well, so who do these laws apply to? I mean, does it matter if I'm an hourly employee or a full-time employee? Does it matter if I'm hurt?
Well, as far as being owed workers' compensation, it does not. That comes into play on how your wages, it's based on your average weekly wage, and that is simply goes to how your wages would be determined. In other words, how much your employer would owe you may be determined differently if you were paid on production or paid hourly or paid by the day or by the year. So
let me put that into practical terms. Let's say you made $300 a week. That's what you made, $300 a week. Easy math, 2/3 of $300 a week is $200. If you cannot work for a whole week, you're owed $200. If you can't work for 10 weeks, 10 weeks you'd make at $300 a week, $3,000, you should be paid $2,000, and then your doctor says you're able to return to work, and you agree you're able to return to work. That's generally speaking. Now, sometimes the employer disagrees, and the employer wants you to see a doctor that the employer or the employer's insurance company says, and the employer's insurance doctor says, I think you can return to work, but your own treating doctor, and you can choose your own doctor, your doctor says, no, this person cannot return to work. He's still got bad back problems on down the road. That's one reason why you use the doctor. Did I get that right? You agree with that?
Right, John, absolutely. An injured worker has a right to choose their own doctor in a reasonable field. If you have a back injury, your employer is not going to be obligated to pay for a cardiologist, but they certainly would be obligated to pay for an orthopedic doctor or possibly a neurologist or something of that nature. But by the same token, the employer can require the employee, quote, from time to time to see their doctor. It's a tit-for-tat system, so you can choose your own doctor, but that employer has a right to have you examined by their doctor as well.
Well, both of you know very well how contentious these sorts of cases can become, and oftentimes, and I don't know, maybe in every case, it's important for the employee to have legal representation. You know, what is it going to cost me if I want to consult with an attorney, if I need to hire an attorney? We're talking about, you know, a major expense here?
That's really good. That's a really good question and really good news. Mike, why don't you?
Well, the good news is I'm unaware of any attorney that will charge somebody to come in and sit down and talk about a workers' comp case. If you have a question of whether you have a comp case, my advice would be to certainly call someone. It's an ounce of prevention, as they say. And those attorneys are not going to charge you to sit down and talk initially with you about your case.
And in addition, if you need to, let's say you find a workers' comp attorney, and you sit with that attorney, and the attorney says, I think you have a work comp case, and I think it's, and my advice is, since the employer is apparently not taking good care of your due medical benefits, your medical bills need to be paid, looks like you're not getting all the wage benefits you should be paid. That means you're not getting paid the money you should be paid to live on while you're not able to work. Probably a good idea to hire a lawyer. Me, or maybe another lawyer if you want to go consult with some other lawyers. You don't have to take money out of your pocket to pay that lawyer. So that's something you really need to know. You don't have to sign on the dotted line. You're not going to owe money to that lawyer under our laws. You only have to pay that lawyer when that lawyer is successful in making the employer pay benefits. And the wages are capped by statute, typically at 20%. And if the lawyer can show that the employer treated you badly, was not acting properly and paying benefits, the lawyer might be able to make the employer pay penalties and pay attorney fees. So
there's so much to get to, and we are quickly running out of time. But before we get to our next segment, let's talk a little bit about undocumented workers and how the laws apply to those undocumented workers. Who wants to take us out?
Good
that
news.
one?
Why don't you tell them, Mike?
That's been not only here in Louisiana but across the country. That has been an area that has been litigated and gone to court many times and has been fought very, very hard by employers. What the courts in Louisiana have said is, we're not concerned with whether or not an employee is here legally or a documented worker. The right for that employee to recover benefits comes from the fact that there's an employment relationship. Just the fact that the employer has hired the employee gives that employee rights, if they're injured, to recover workers' comp benefits. So
there's no reason to fear there on the side of the employee. If you're injured, and you should report that.
John,
just talk to a lawyer. They have rights. The law gives people rights, but talk to a lawyer. That's the short answer.
And it's important to note that the laws are different state to state. Is that right? The workers' comp laws are different?
Workers' comp laws are different state to state.
Okay, all right. Well, we have to take a quick break. Coming up next, your questions for Attorney Whitehead when we come back. So stay tuned. We'll be back in just a few short moments.